The world sees stubbornness. I see a soft, soft heart. I see you, my daughter, 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
Very good morning. You are watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. This is Morning Brief at 9. The big news coming, of course, by way of that 2-week ceasefire announced by U.S. President Donald Trump that Iran has also agreed to. First up, let's take a quick look at all the headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump announces 2-week ceasefire with Iran. Ceasefire conditional on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, as U.S. has already met military objectives. Iran's Foreign Minister Seyed Abbas Araghchi agrees to cease military operations for 2 weeks and allow safe passage via the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. considers that 10-point proposal. We'll tell you all about the 10 points in that proposal on the show. Trump's civilization will die tonight threat triggers impeachment calls, 25th Amendment push despite ceasefire announcement. Democrat Jim McGovern raises alarm over Trump's access to nuclear codes, urges cabinet to act against madman. But Iran launches fresh barrage of missiles at Israel despite ceasefire announcement. Missiles intercepted over Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, as well as West Bank. In a relief, global oil prices plunge in biggest one-day fall since the 1991 Gulf War. After Trump announces conditional Iran ceasefire, Brent and WTI both slide around 13%. Reports say Chinese officials encouraged Iran to look for a path toward a ceasefire in war, with the U.S. and Israel emerging as a key last-minute player. Meanwhile, protests erupt in Washington, D.C. after Trump's ceasefire announcement. Crowds gather outside the White House demanding accountability. And the big story that we continue to track right here on News 9 all day today comes by way of the ceasefire announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump on his Truth Social post, something that Iran has also agreed to. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 2-week suspension of planned military strikes against Iran. The move follows discussions with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Military Chief Asim Munir, who requested a pause. The ceasefire is conditional on Iran fully and safely reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Trump described it as a double-sided ceasefire, emphasizing that most past points of contention have been settled, and the pause allows time to finalize a long-term peace agreement in West Asia. Now, this comes after Trump said that if negotiations fail before his 8 p.m. Eastern Time deadline on Tuesday, strikes could still go ahead. He warned Iran could face an attack like they have not seen, while leaving a narrow window of diplomacy if there is progress. And that's the latest coming in this morning, just minutes before that planned attack on Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a ceasefire, a conditional ceasefire, what he calls a double-sided ceasefire, conditional to Iran opening the Strait of Hormuz for this period of the ceasefire. Iran, meanwhile, has agreed to the conditions laid out by U.S. President Donald Trump, but has also added its own 10-point proposal, which the U.S. President now says is workable. We'll tell you all about that. And it clearly appears like the rising diplomatic activity around the Gulf do signal a possible pause in tensions, with back-channel coordination and conditional assurances shaping the next steps. Foreign Minister of Iran, Seyed Abbas Araghchi, has said Iran has conveyed on behalf of its Supreme National Security Council appreciation to Shehbaz Sharif and Asim Munir for efforts to de-escalate the conflict. He also indicated that Iran was responding to a request from Pakistan's leadership and parallel outreach from the United States for talks based on a proposed framework. He stated that if attacks on Iran were halted, Iranian armed forces would stop their defensive operations. Araghchi added that Iran was willing to facilitate limited, coordinated, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz for a 2-week period, subject to its military's approval. Now, the statement suggested a conditional de-escalation window linking cessation of hostilities to reciprocal restraint and opening the door for negotiations. Meanwhile, there is this 10-point proposal, or a counter-proposal, some are calling it, to the 15-point proposal first drafted by the United States. And this 10-point proposal demands from the U.S., as per Iran's requirement, a commitment to non-aggression. That is the first point on this 10-point proposal demanded by Iran for continuation of peace in the region. Next up is the continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Remember, the Strait of Hormuz was a free passage for movement of cargo as well as oil tankers until the war broke out on the 28th of February. And now Iran is asking for control, the continuation control over the Strait of Hormuz. Next up on the 10-point agenda, the 10-point proposal is acceptance of uranium enrichment, followed by lifting of all primary sanctions on Iran and then also lifting of all secondary sanctions. Next up is the termination of all UN Security Council resolutions. Then there's termination of all Board of Governors resolution, followed by the payment of compensation to Iran. This is the payment of compensation by way of the war-inflicted damages caused in the country. The penultimate point happens to be the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the West Asian region. And finally, cessation of war on all fronts, including against Hezbollah in Lebanon. But now new details are emerging from Iran's ceasefire proposal, with analysts noting a significant term included first in the Farsi version of the proposal that was not originally present in the English language text circulating internationally. According to reports, the Farsi version of Tehran's ceasefire plan explicitly includes the acceptance of uranium enrichment, a contentious issue tied to Iran's civil nuclear program, a term that does not appear in the English version of the proposal. But Iranian embassies and consulates from across the world are now posting the version of these 10-point proposal in English, including the enrichment of uranium. Now, do remember, just hours before announcing this 2-week ceasefire with Iran, U.S. President Donald Trump had put out yet another explosive post on Truth Social, warning Iran that the whole civilization will die tonight. Remember, this was hours before that 8 p.m. Eastern Time deadline on Tuesday. Now, he said, and I quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death will finally end. God bless the great people of Iran," unquote. However, Trump's statement had kept the possibility of an off-ramp open, saying that maybe something revolutionary wonderful can happen. Now, the Iranian embassy in Turkey had replied to the warning on X, saying, and I quote, "A psychopath's threat will not end what time could not," unquote. Now, from the launch of Operation Epic Fury on the 28th of February this year, the Trump administration's stated goals in Iran have, in fact, evolved. Now, in the early phase, the focus was military-centric, destroying Iran's ballistic missile program, annihilating its navy, preventing any nuclear weapon, and cutting off support to terror proxies. Now, by mid-March, as strikes intensified, both U.S. and Iran, Washington's objectives expanded to include the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz for global shipping and threats against Iran's energy infrastructure. In the late phase, the messaging shifted towards claiming an organic regime change in Iran with the death of several senior leaders. Meanwhile, Donald Trump also announced the core military goals were nearly complete or exceeded, while the U.S. administration moved towards ceasefire talks and a potential long-term deal. Now, as the ceasefire was announced earlier today, both U.S. and Iran have claimed victory. Only time eventually will tell who really gained and who lost out of this war. And even as that ceasefire for 2 weeks has been announced by the United States and a conditional approval has come in from the Iranian side, there are still certain questions that remain unanswered as of this moment. And we really don't know when and if at all we will get answers to those questions. First up really is, what were the real objectives of the United States and the Trump administration in the war on Iran? What were the social objectives? What were the military objectives? And have any of those really been achieved? Even as U.S. President Donald Trump claims that the military aggression has paved its dividends and the fact that the military objectives have been met and even exceeded. Next up really is, how can Trump claim military objectives met and exceeded when the objectives of the war, the military objectives of the war, were largely unclear right from the start? And then, did the regime change indeed happen with the fact that Mojtaba Khamenei is still in command of the Iranian regime? Next up, the fourth unanswered question is, does the U.S. find what Iran has listed out in its 10-point proposal, the acceptance of enrichment? Does U.S. find that acceptance of enrichment demand by Iran workable? Because remember, U.S. President Donald Trump had said that the 10-point proposal by Iran is now workable. The fifth question that we pose is, if U.S. allows the lifting of sanctions, does Iran walk away as the winner in this war in West Asia, with U.S. and Israel both pounding Iran? The sixth question is, with Iran's infrastructure destruction, is Israel potentially the ultimate victor in West Asia militarily as well as by way of showing its own hegemony? The seventh question we posed this morning, has Iran's defensive posture as well as its attack on U.S. allies in West Asia tacoed Trump? And TACO is the acronym used for Trump always chickens out. The eighth question is, did Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz outpower U.S.-Israel military might? And finally, did Trump instigate a new world order where Iran can legally now control the Strait of Hormuz, which was open all along until February 28th? And even though a ceasefire has been announced, the Tuesday morning post by Donald Trump warning that a whole civilization will die tonight has ignited a chorus of demands from either impeachment or action under the 25th Amendment by Democrats in the United States. Now, more than 85 House Democrats had called for President Trump to be impeached or removed via the 25th Amendment as of Tuesday evening. Now, Representative Eric Swalwell said the president must be removed. I quote him, "If Congress is too cowardly to do it, his own cabinet must," he tweeted. Now, Speaker Nancy Pelosi has rallied the call, bringing the number of House Democrats seeking Trump's removal to 70, which later went up to 85. Representative Gwen Moore warned Congress must rein in President Trump. Now is the time for Republicans to join Democrats in ending what he calls his madness. I also quote him, he says, "He is unfit to serve and must be removed through any possible avenue," unquote. Representative Melanie Stansbury added, "Just because the president announces he's agreed to a 2-week ceasefire moments before threatening war crimes does not make him fit to serve," unquote. Washington is now at a fever pitch as fears over Trump's actions mount, and lawmakers debate the extraordinary steps needed to check a president they say has crossed the line.
I think it's very clear that Donald Trump is not fit to serve as president and commander-in-chief of the United States at this point. And I have called for the use of every possible tool to remove Trump from his position, whether that's the invocation of the 25th Amendment, which would require the cabinet acting, impeachment, which would require Congress to act. And we are planning to put another war resolution on the House floor as soon as we're able to vote to end the war. And so we're looking at all constitutional means to rein in Trump and to stop him from committing crimes. As a Democrat, the ball is in the court of the Republicans. They control the executive branch, they control the Senate, they control the House, and we have not seen our Republican colleagues being willing to take a public stance to hold the president accountable. And so we're calling on the speaker, on the leadership, and on our Republican colleagues, both in the cabinet and in the Congress, to take action now. I think that we are in complete unanimous agreement, at least in the House caucus, that we need to be called back immediately. You've probably seen the statements from our leadership, and all across social media platforms today, we've been calling for the speaker to call us back. This is not unlike the emergencies that we had in the fall during the government shutdown. And it's not clear at this point whether or not Johnson will take any action. We've seen time and time again that as an ally of the president, he's been unwilling to do anything that would cross Trump.
The U.S. Democrat Party representative from Massachusetts, Jim McGovern, expressed concerns regarding Trump having access to nuclear codes. Jim McGovern has asked the cabinet to take away nuclear codes from what he calls a madman. Let's listen into what he said.
The President of the United States is a madman. In case you haven't heard, he's threatening to commit genocidal war crimes, threatening to wipe out an entire civilization, killing innocent men, women, and children. That is illegal under federal and international law. Our brave men and women in the military took an oath to the Constitution, not to a president. And under law, they are required to disobey unlawful orders. Now, if Trump's cabinet had an ounce of integrity, they'd invoke the 25th Amendment, and they would take the nuclear codes away from this deranged lunatic before more innocent people are killed. But they're a bunch of fawning sycophants, and so I doubt they're going to do that. Speaker Johnson, you need to call Congress back into session right now. We need to rein in this psychopath. We need to debate, and we need to vote to end this war now.
And even as U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran, a political storm is brewing back home with growing calls to invoke the 25th Amendment. Donald Trump's recent remarks on Iran, including controversial and sharply worded statements, including the likes of wiping out an entire civilization, have triggered criticism and raised questions over his conduct and decision-making. So can a sitting U.S. president really be removed under the 25th Amendment? Now here's what the U.S. Constitution says. The 25th Amendment, ratified in 1967 after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, lays down the process for presidential succession and dealing with incapacity. It has 4 sections. Under Section 1, the Vice President becomes President if the office falls vacant due to death, resignation, or removal. Section 2 allows the President to nominate a new Vice President subject to approval by both houses of Congress. Section 3 provides for a temporary transfer of power where the President can voluntarily hand over duties to the Vice President. But the most debated provision is Section 4, which allows the Vice President and a majority of the Cabinet to declare the President unfit to serve, making the Vice President the acting President. If the President contests this, Congress must step in with a 2/3 majority required to keep the Vice President in charge. Amid Trump's repeated and shifting statements on the Iran conflict, some lawmakers are now urging his cabinet to consider invoking the Section 4 under the 25th Amendment to impeach U.S. President Donald Trump. And despite the announcement of a ceasefire, the Israeli Air Force continues to carry out strikes in Iran. Iran, meanwhile, has fired several salvos of ballistic missiles at Israel since the ceasefire was reportedly supposed to take effect. Additionally, while Pakistan's Prime Minister said the ceasefire would also include Lebanon, there's no indication that Israel has halted its operations against Hezbollah as of now. In fact, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has gone ahead and said that the attacks on Hezbollah will continue. Meanwhile, Joe Kent, the former counterterrorism chief, said that for the ceasefire to work, Israel has to be controlled. Listen in.
Great news this evening that there's been a 2-week ceasefire agreed upon tentatively between us and the Iranians. It's unconfirmed yet if the Iranians have accepted this deal as well, but I hope that they have. It's absolutely essential that we ensure that the Israelis do not sabotage this 2-week ceasefire or eventually the lasting peace that we're trying to achieve with the Iranians. We're on the cusp of being able to have the Strait of Hormuz reopened to hopefully start to get the world energy supply and commerce back online. The last thing we need is the Israelis doing what they have done in past negotiations and targeting the negotiators or taking a series of strikes that escalates the conflict. In order to ensure that we can restrain the Israelis, we actually have to start removing features of the military support that we give to them. We have to take away enough from them that they simply cannot go on the offense, that they're using all their military capabilities that we provide for them and that they have organically for the defense of their country and not for offensive operations.
And in the biggest one-day fall, or rather correction, since the 1991 Gulf War, global oil prices have plunged sharply on Wednesday after U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire agreement with Iran. Brent crude is down 13%, slipping to around $95 a barrel and 40 cents, while U.S. benchmark WTI has also fallen about 14%, now around $97.13 for every barrel. Now, the 2-week temporary truce agreement, however, comes with conditions. Iran is expected to fully reopen the critical Strait of Hormuz in exchange of the ceasefire. Now, even after a sharp drop, oil prices remain well above the pre-war levels, highlighting the lingering volatility in global markets. Remember, at the start of the war, the Brent was trading at about $72 a barrel. And if you go back to the start of this calendar year, on the 2nd of Jan, Brent was as low as about $60 a barrel. Now, even despite touching an intraday high of about $120 a barrel, oil is now trading in the range of about $95 a barrel as far as the Brent is concerned. Now, for now, the ceasefire has offered urgent relief, but uncertainty remains over how durable this truce will really be. All right, and markets are rejoicing the news of the ceasefire. In fact, the tints of green are visible across markets in Asia, including India. We'll come to India in just a bit, but first let's look at the Asian markets this morning. All really crossing those highs after days and days of volatility, which still potentially will persist. But of course, the lows on account of the disrupted oil supply now seem to be reversing, at least as far as valuations and investor confidence is concerned. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is up almost 2.75 percentage point this morning, while Japan's Nikkei 225 benchmark is up almost 5% in the first 2 hours or so of trading. Similar news coming in from South Korea's Kospi, which is up almost 6% now. Remember, it started the day almost 5% up. It's almost 6% up now. Taiwan's TAIEX is up about 4.3%, and even China's Shanghai Composite Index is up almost 2% in trade this morning. Early signs seem to show great movement even on the Indian stock market, as both the Sensex and Nifty are seeing some really positive start movements this morning. Sensex is up almost 2,660 points in just the first 5 minutes of trade. That's about 3.5% higher than the last closing price of yesterday. In fact, Sensex is now well above the 77,200 mark, inching closer to the 77,300. Meanwhile, Nifty 50 also up about 3.5%, up about 789 points, almost getting close to the levels of about 24,000. Small cap and mid cap pretty much going step in direction with the Nifty and the Sensex both up more than 3% in trade. India's volatility index, India VIX, has slipped by about 5 points or so this morning, now down to levels of about 20. Still elevated levels, but much better than the 28s and the 25s that we saw earlier. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map as well, and fantastic advances seen this morning as far as India's large cap stocks are concerned, barring a few exceptions which happen to be ONGC, Coal India as well as Tech Mahindra. But all in all, India's banking sector really looking very healthy in the green this morning. HDFC Bank is up 4.5%, SBI is up almost 4%, ICICI Bank up more than 4%. Even the auto sector is showing some great signals this morning. Maruti Suzuki as well as Mahindra and Mahindra both up in the range of about 5% or so. Even India's IT sector, barring that one aberration of Tech Mahindra, is in the green, taking cues from a stronger closing in the US markets. All right, we have Gaurang Shah, Senior Vice President, Geojit Financial Services, joining us this morning. Gaurang, what a lovely day to have you here back with us on News 9. And, well, there were talks. In fact, you on the show last week were talking about TACO. And here we have it. We have potentially a situation where Trump has not gone ahead and engaged with that mass destruction on Iran, rather has called for a 2-week ceasefire. Markets across Asia rejoicing, India no exception.
Thank you, Karthik, for having me on the show. Good morning to all your viewers, and to you, a small disclosure. Stock recommendations that I'll be sharing in the show, Karthik, they are part of our fundamental research team stock recommendation from a long-term point of view. Our company, Geojit, or myself, we do not have any kind of personal investments, no financial interest, no conflict of interest, but we share similar investment ideas with our clients. They might have their investment interest. So, Karthik, honestly speaking, first of all, from the start of this unfortunate geopolitical situation on 28th of Feb 2026, my view was that it was senseless, mindless, unnecessary blood and destruction of infrastructure. Look at the number of lives that you have lost and look at the kind of damage to the infrastructure. And let me say this, Karthik, in case if there is actually a truce and by the time during this 2-week or end of 2-week, there is an agreement in this place which is signed, sealed and delivered by respective representatives of their country. And if there is wisdom, common sense and fine sense of judgment prevailing, the recreation of these infrastructures is going to take time, Karthik, because they have been damaged out of the blues.
And the question, Gaurang, really is who's going to pay for it? Because Iran wants the US to pay for all the war damages inflicted on the territory of Iran. And US, I'm pretty sure, is not going to be agreeable to that.
Absolutely, Karthik. And more importantly, whosoever pays for it. Recreating it is going to take years, Karthik. I think Oman has said that it may take anything between 3 to 5 years to bring back the facilities that existed before this war to back to normalcy. So it's not going to be a very easy, smooth sailing, even if there is a peace deal in place between these 2 weeks or the end of 2 weeks. But having said that, I think it is a sign of relief. But remember one thing, this is Donald Trump. He is known for shifting his goals last year from the time he implemented tariff to this unpleasant geopolitical situation which started on 28th of Feb and since then has been shifting the goal. So let's hope there is an end of this geopolitical tension and there is de-escalation. And if it is, then definitely markets are going to breathe a lot of relief. And more importantly, for a country like India, economy depends upon import of crude oil and natural gas. And as we have discussed over the last 6 weeks, I don't want to go into details.
Yeah.
Today's credit policy also, Karthik, so we need to watch out for what the Honorable RBI governor has to say in terms of inflation impact because of rising crude oil prices and the outlook on economy and GDP.
Absolutely.
So while the markets are in the green, let's hope that by the time this time frame ends, there is a resolution in place.
Absolutely. Well, of course, we will be waiting for RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra to start giving away whatever the Monetary Policy Committee decided upon at 10 a.m. today, and we will keep a track on that. But in the short term, at least, let's assume if this 15-day ceasefire holds and thereafter, Gaurang, if this were to extend into a lasting peace, then can those inflation worries be ebbed out for now at least? Or do you think the kind of impact that we've seen on crude prices and the high prices at which India has imported crude oil into the country is eventually going to be passed on to consumers?
It's going to be a while before it is passed on to you and me, Karthik, because we have 4 state elections and 1 union territory election. So we'll have to wait out for that. But somebody has to pay for it, right? From $60-65 a barrel before geopolitical situation to $110 a barrel, which is almost twice. Along with that, Karthik, we had a depreciating rupee against the dollar. Rupee touched an all-time low against the dollar of almost about 94, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So even that we have to take into consideration, right? So I think post the election in 4 states and 1 union territory and the outcome of the election result, if there is going to be elevated level, then definitely consumers like you and me will have to pay a price for it, depending upon how much it is passed on to us and how much the government is going to bear in terms of subsidy or any kind of benefit to the oil marketing companies. But the fact remains that yes, it is going to create a dent on the inflation, and possibly that's what exactly I want to listen into the governor this morning once he starts talking about the credit policy as to what is his view in terms of where the inflation is heading and where the GDP growth rate is heading.
Now, do you think is the time, given that Q4 earnings are going to be announced, starting, of course, with the big win TCS next week. But overall, do you feel that there is going to be at least fewer distractions as far as investors are concerned, and the focus can go back to fundamentals and not really get buoyed by geopolitics and geoeconomics? So do you think this is a time that the focus from an investor perspective will come back to corporate earnings?
First of all, Karthik, I think since the time the geopolitical situation broke out, it will be a month, 28th of Feb till 31st of March, and of course, some impact might be visible in the first quarter of this new financial year. So the impact on earnings, fourth quarter earnings last financial year would not be felt to a great extent, because more or less companies which are dependent on crude derivative, they have long-term contracts, right? So I don't think that's going to be a major dampener in terms of Q4 earnings. Impact of it might be felt in the first or maybe second quarter of this new financial year, depending upon, again, which way the ceasefire goes and how much of it is going to take into consideration for easing of crude oil prices, and of course where the currency stands in terms of rupee dollar equation. So I don't think any serious impact would be felt in the fourth quarter of last financial year. Some amount of it could be visible in first and second quarter of this financial.
All right. And if I were to sort of pick your brains on which are the sectors which are likely to be in focus now that there is this sort of truce in place, at least temporary for now, hopefully it'll become more permanent going forward. But if there were sectors to pick up right now, do you think this is the time to pick up perhaps sectors like oil marketing companies?
Well, if you have risk on appetite, I would definitely say yes. Look, Karthik, we are 2,500 points uptick on Sensex this morning, 750 odd points uptick in Nifty, 7,700 points on mid cap, so and so forth for the bank Nifty.
Right.
So today's gap up, we need to see how the day pans out. Of course, what the governor also has to say in terms of GDP growth rate, inflation, and the state of economy. Long-term point of view, if you ask me, as a disclosure again, we have positive coverage on all the 3 oil marketing companies, HPCL, BPCL, IOC. And I think along with that, sectors which are dependent on crude derivatives, paint, tire industry, aviation sector, something like an Interglobe Aviation, should definitely be looked upon, provided you have a long-term time horizon and a little bit of elevated risk appetite.
Right, and pretty much in sync with your recommendation here, you are looking at stocks of IOC, BPCL and HPCL all gaining massive ground this morning. In fact, HPCL is up about 7.5%, BPCL is up about 7%, and Indian Oil is up about 5.5% or so. Meanwhile, what do you make of airlines as well as, the travel, cargo, logistics sector as a whole? Do you think there is going to eventually be a slightly less risky airspace as well as shipping routes if this truce for now continues to become, let's say, a more permanent solution in West Asia?
So Karthik, as we all have been given to understand that one of the conditions was that Iran will open up Strait of Hormuz, and that's what Iran has agreed upon. Of course, today, tomorrow, we'll have a little bit of more clarity on that. So that will enable free movement of sea vessels, right? And that was the big point of contention in terms of not only natural gas and crude oil, but also for other raw material that comes in from Middle East countries via the Strait of Hormuz. For example, fertilizer, urea, petrochemicals, etc., etc., etc. So this will have positive impact on logistic companies. We have coverage on delivery. We have coverage on Transport Corporation of India. We have a positive coverage on Blue Dart. On the aviation pack, like I mentioned, we are positive on Interglobe Aviation. And my sense is that this will also have a positive impact on tire manufacturing companies and paint industry, because they are directly dependent upon crude oil and crude derivatives. So that should work out well in case if this has to be a long-lasting piece.
All right, and that is exactly what we are seeing even on the charts this morning. In fact, Interglobe Aviation is up almost 10%. Remember, the Indigo stock was battered given the closure of airspace. Investors hoping that this truce, the ceasefire, will open up airways across West Asia, where Indigo continues to fly. And meanwhile, all the other logistics and cargo companies that you mentioned also showing pretty neat signals this morning as far as investor gains are concerned. Meanwhile, two companies that are in the red, surprisingly, again from the energy pack, are ONGC and Coal India. I mean, one understands the sort of indirect relationship between oil prices and perhaps our own exploration as well as our own reserves as far as coal is concerned. But overall, a good moment, a good day to perhaps invest, dabble in these stocks as well.
So positive coverage again as a disclosure on both ONGC and Coal India. And that was rightly so. When crude oil prices were boiling, you had companies like ONGC doing the opposite of what the market was doing. And with crude oil prices going up, exploration companies tend to benefit. With crude oil prices going down, exploration companies tend to have a negative impact. On Coal India, I think what the government, I beg your pardon, what the management has mentioned is the output of coal is increasing, the quality of coal is increasing, and more importantly, Karthik, the realizations via e-auctions are also better. So we remain positive on Coal India as well.
All right, Gaurang, always a pleasure having you here with us on News 9, particularly so on such an important news day like today. As always, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Karthik. All the best. Thank you.
And with that, we will slip into a very short break. A lot more coming up on the other side. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया Kushaq. Easy to love. Skoda.
Others see a teenage tantrum. I see you standing your ground. The world sees stubbornness. I see a soft, soft heart. I see you, my daughter, 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
Welcome back. You are watching News 9 and we are bringing you all the updates on the ceasefire in West Asia. But first up, let's go back now to the recent history of U.S. President Donald Trump's aggression on Iran, where it started, how it started, and what it eventually led to. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump used Truth Social to online and sometimes expand America's goals in Operation Epic Fury. Now remember, on February 28th, as strikes began, Trump declared, and I quote him, "Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei and his gangs of bloodthirsty thugs," unquote. Now, he added that bombing would continue as long as necessary to achieve what he calls our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world. And then comes March 20th. Donald Trump listed the core military objectives and claimed progress. He wrote on March 20th, and I quote him again, "We are getting very close to meeting our objectives." And what are these objectives? Number one, completely degrading Iranian missile capability. Number two, destroying Iran's defensive industrial base. Number three, eliminating Iran's Navy and Air Force. Number four, never allowing Iran to get even close to nuclear capability. And number five, protecting U.S. allies in Middle East. Now, as the operation continued into early April, the tone sharpened. Remember, on March 31st, Donald Trump urged countries that did not help in U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran to buy American oil and go to the Strait of Hormuz and just take it. He wrote, and I quote, "All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapacitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the United States. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Go and take the strait and just take it." Now, Trump later on, early on, in fact, on April 5th, said a crew member caught behind enemy lines after Iran shot down his F-15 fighter jet is now safe and sound after being rescued by the U.S. military. Also on April 5th, the same day, Donald Trump used offensive language to warn Iran. He said, and I quote, "Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up in one in Iran." Remember, this April 5th post was 2 days before what followed on April 7th that seemed like the ultimate warning for Tehran. Trump stated, and I quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it will. It probably will. 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death, and finally end. God bless the great people of Iran," unquote. And U.S. President Donald Trump announced the start of major military operations against Iran in a rapidly escalating conflict that began, remember, on February 28th. What followed was a series of intense airstrikes, the killing of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, heavy damage to Iran's military infrastructure, and ongoing threats over its nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz. Now, over the past 5 weeks, President Trump has delivered blunt, often colorful remarks, both in public statements and on Truth Social, outlining America's objectives, celebrating battlefield gains, pushing for negotiations, and issuing stark warnings to Tehran. Here are some of the key reactions from U.S. President Donald Trump in recent weeks.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. The regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. And we're going to continue to do well. We have the greatest military in the world by far. If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. If we didn't do the B-2 attack a number of months ago, they would have a nuclear weapon. And when crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen. We're also waiving certain oil-related sanctions to reduce prices. So we have sanctions on some countries. We're going to take those sanctions off. till this straightens out. Then who knows, maybe we won't have to put them on. There'll be so much peace. But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. But we're not ready to leave yet, but we'll be leaving in the near future. We'll be leaving in pretty much the very near future. But right now, they've been decimated from every standpoint. And again, we've had great support from countries in the Middle East, great support, but we've had no support from, essentially, no support from NATO. They don't know what's happening. Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is all gone, it's all gone, their radar is all gone, their leaders are all gone, the next set of leaders are all gone, and the next set of leaders are mostly gone, and now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to. We have nobody to talk to, and you know what? We like it that way. We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other. But we've had very strong talks. Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner had them. They went, I would say, perfectly. They said to show you the fact that we're real and solid and we're there, we're going to let you have 8 boats of oil, 8 boats, 8 big boats of oil. This was 2 days ago. And they'll sail up tomorrow. That was 3 days ago. And I didn't think much about it. And then I watched the news, and they said, a very good anchor, actually, happened to be Fox. But I watched it, and he said, something's unusual happening. There are 8 boats that are going right up the middle of the Hormuz Strait. 8 big tankers are going loaded up with oil right through. And I said, well, I guess they were right, and they were real. And I think they were Pakistani flagged. Yes. And I said, well, I guess we're dealing with the right people. And actually, they then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats. They want to make a deal. The reason they want to make a deal is they have been just. We're negotiating now, and it'd be great if we could do something, but they have to open it up. They have to open up the strait of Hormuz. And now today they gave us as a tribute, I don't know, I can't define it exactly, but they gave us, I think out of a sign of respect, 20 boats of oil, big boats of oil, going through the Hormuz Strait. And that's taking place starting tomorrow morning. I would only say that we're doing extremely well in that negotiation, but you never know with Iran because we negotiate with them and then we always have to blow them up. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead.
And of course, what followed that was the announcement of the ceasefire this morning. Well, the White House on Wednesday hailed the 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran as a huge success for Washington, citing the role of U.S. military operations in creating diplomatic leverage. Caroline Leavitt said in a statement, and I quote, from the very beginning of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump estimated this would be a 4 to 6 week operation. Now, thanks to the unbelievable capabilities of our warriors, we have achieved and exceeded our core military objectives in 38 days, unquote. Caroline Leavitt further noted that the ceasefire created a window for diplomacy and long-term peace, emphasizing Trump's role in reopening the strategic Strait of Hormuz. She also went on to write, and I quote, never underestimate President Trump's ability to advance America's interests and broker peace, unquote. Well, let's talk about that Strait of Hormuz, because for decades, the Strait of Hormuz has been one of the world's most critical maritime corridors, a narrow waterway through which nearly 1/5 or 20% of the world's oil and LNG flows every single day. Now, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea, this corridor is used by energy exporters like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar and the UAE, in addition to Iran, and by the global economy that depends on their supplies. Roughly 20 million barrels of oil move through this passage daily, at least until February 28th, making it one of the most strategic shipping lanes on the planet. But in recent weeks, the strait had been at the center of escalating tensions between Iran and the U.S. and Israel. After the conflict erupted earlier this year, Iran effectively restricted movement through the waterway, threatening tankers, striking vessels and sending global energy markets into shock. Shipping traffic dropped dramatically, insurance costs soared, and countries across Asia and Europe scrambled to manage fuel shortages. Now, a fragile ceasefire between Washington and Tehran appears to have brought temporary relief. Under the terms of the deal, Iran has agreed to guarantee safe passage for ships through the Strait of Hormuz, but only under coordination with Iranian authorities. Now, at first glance, this sounds like a reopening of the world's most vital energy artery. But let's look a little closer. The implications could be far more significant, because historically, the Strait of Hormuz has never belonged to any one country. Legally, the Strait of Hormuz is classified as an international strait used for global navigation, where ships from all nations have the right of transit passage. In other words, vessels traditionally move through this corridor freely and without needing permission from Iran or any other state for that matter. But today's arrangement appears to shift that balance. With ships now expected to coordinate passage with Iranian authority, Tehran is effectively asserting operational control over one of the world's most strategic waterways, and add to that, it's also adding a price tag of $2 million per ship that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Now that raises a big question. Has the United States, by agreeing to the ceasefire framework, tactically yet tacitly accepted a new reality in the Gulf? A reality where Iran is no longer just a coastal state bordering the strait, but a gatekeeper controlling who passes through it. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz was treated as a global commons, open to all, governed by international law and freedom of navigation. But if passage now depends on Tehran's approval, the geopolitical equation could be shifting dramatically, because what we may be witnessing is not just a ceasefire. It may be the moment when the world's most important energy choke point quietly moved from international passage to Iranian leverage. And if that precedent holds, the status quo in the Gulf and global energy security may never be the same again. And shifting away now from the West Asian conflict, which is now on a fine ceasefire balance, let's move on now to outer space, as the crew on board the Artemis 2 mission of NASA, which comprises 4 astronauts, are now on their way back home after a dramatic lunar fly-around, an expedition that saw them travel farther from Earth than any other humans have ever been before. Now, the crew had lost contact with the Earth, which was expected for about 40 minutes as they traveled directly behind the moon. With communications re-established, astronaut Christina Koch said, and I quote, "It's so great to hear the Earth again," unquote. Now, soon after, the spacecraft dipped to within a few thousand miles of the lunar surface, and the crew witnessed a total eclipse of the sun as the moon blocked out its light. The vessel is now on its way back. We leave you with this report.
Good morning, Houston. We are 202,306 nautical miles away. Earth is pulling us back, and we are happy about that. We're ready for morning DPC.
We're happy about that, too, and ready for DPC. We've got about a dozen quick items for you.
Integrity, this is the International Space Station. How do you hear?
International Space Station, and Jessica, we have you loud and clear. How about us?
We have you loud and clear as well, and we have DME TV up, so we have a view of you right now, and it is making us so excited.
From the 4 members of the spacecraft integrity, we really want to just say our deepest appreciation to the 7 members of the International Space Station, and this has been a true treat. It takes the entire world to do amazing things like this, and to get to come together as this group of people and talk for just a minute at these distances. We are all off the planet Earth right now, and we're all going to go home to that planet, and that is a very special thing.
We are loving all 4 of you from here, from the space station in low Earth orbit. We'll keep the fires burning here.
Walk down Cool Street. When you're hot, we'll cool you down on Cool Street. On Cool Street. On Cool Street. Ooh, I'm cool. Chill your thrill. I'm cool. Chill your thrill. I'm cool. Chill your thrill.